Alright, it's time to take a look at the Cobra. This is the Gurista Pirates' new faction battleship, and I would say probably one of the tankiest battleships in the game at the moment. Has a lot of similarities to the Rattlesnake, and it is very similar to some of the new bomber battleships. This is the only faction battleship that's able to be equipped with a bomb launcher. Now let's take a look at the trait description. Robos plus 500% larger drone damage and plus 250% larger drone EHP, of course, can be fit with the missile launcher bomb. Expert large drone operation bonus will give you some very decent large drone damage, and obviously the Cobra will have extra kinetic and thermal damage bonus, as well as a large missile torpedo explosion radius bonus to improve the application, as well as 5% shield resistance per skill level. Now obviously this is a shield tank, so please do not attempt to armor tank a Cobra, it's not going to end well. Let's quickly take a look at the Rattlesnake and the Cobra. Now we all know tomorrow this ship will be buffed, it will receive a extra medium slot module and it will receive a small bonus on the larger drone damage. Now compared to the Rattlesnake, it does have some, I would say it does look like it does have some significant differences in the roll bonus, and when we look at the other stats, yeah, it is definitely a slight upgrade, and after tomorrow's patch the stats will look a little bit better than what we see here. But overall, it does seem like a solid upgrade. The best, I would say, upgrade is definitely in the tank, and you can see that the thermal resistance is a bit higher on the Cobra than on the Rattlesnake on the default stats, which is very interesting. Now, worth noting, this is not my ship, this is my friend's ship, and I will have to return the ship in the same in the same shape that I found it at. So basically, let me just screenshot that. If I tamper with the build, I have to make sure that everything is back in its place. Here you can take a look at the missile stats. Actually, in the case of the Cobra, I'm pretty happy with how the missiles turned out. The missiles are actually quite useful now. And now, as we all know, tomorrow the ship will get a 4th medium slot, so we'll have the ability to fit a web, which I would say is very nice. But in this case, once Kramer, Nosferatu and a neutralizer. The tank of this ship, as I mentioned before already, is really good. The stats on the shield are very similar to the Chameleon, resistance wise. Has the same 25% bonus on all damage types if you have the extra skill nullify, which honestly is very nice. It does give you the ability to super chunk this thing, and yeah, this little boat has the potential to be quite the floating brick. That's a very nice thing, of course. When it comes to the nanocores, it is the same story as with the previous faction battleship that I looked at. Basically, if you have a nanocore for it, a good chance that it will work. Here you can take a look at the list of compatible nanocores. I've been told that not all of them are compatible, so I'll just quickly give you a list of what is available. So if you have one of these nanocores, then yeah, you will be able to use them on this ship. So let's undock and let's take a look at the active stats. Now this ship is built kind of to be a fusion between DPS and tank. However, I have to say, very solid tank for the rigs that the ship has, and at the same time very good DPS. You have to remember that drones and drone boats are still kind of considered the scariest ship in the game at the moment because of the bomber attack, the game plan, and the Rattlesnake, or the Cobra in this case, is no different. Very solid tank on the ship, even with the current build. Now obviously you have the bomb launcher, which is not usable in high sec and low sec, only in null sec you can launch this. But yeah, technically this is a bomber battleship, which is one of the new categories. I'm a marauder, but it lacks the the marauder repair in this case. It's a very interesting ship indeed. 80, 87, 88 and 87% resistance. 69,000 in shield hit point. Of course, you can definitely make this ship tankier than it is right now if you have all integration rigs. You can easily get this to 95+%, and you can make an active tank with that type of build to be capacitor stable. Tomorrow, after tomorrow's patch, will be very easy to do with a extra medium slot for an extra Nosferatu. So yeah, when it comes to tank, I am definitely very happy with this ship. The DPS side of things is also decent. Now I think I'm missing one of the expert skills for level 5 in order to have the best possible DPS, and obviously I'm missing nanocore, but if you have a proper nanocore for this ship, you can definitely expect some pretty nasty DPS. And of course you can do the build with 4 damage modules or 3, depending on what build you're aiming for. You can utilize an integration rig setup from the Rattlesnake on this ship, also works the same way. Will actually work better because you will have a lot more tank. The difference is 20 versus 25%, so 5% difference in tank, and those 5%, while on paper might not look like too significant, I can tell you those 5% are very important. Now let me just quickly steal, and speaking of bomber battleships, yeah, I have a bomber battleship here, I forgot, but let me see if I can steal a module for it from it. Yeah, there is the damage control that I can borrow from my Hyperion bomber. I love the bomber battleships, they are evil. When I say evil, they are very tanky, and this thing is definitely a mini dreadnought. That's what they're meant to be, and they are fulfilling that role really well. I have no complaints about those marauders, they're fantastic. Now obviously, I usually never undock without a damage control nowadays, because damage controls save so many of my ships. It just became a must-have on all of my ships. You can use a damage control if you like, you can also not use it if you like, depend on the build, but I prefer to have a damage control. It is extremely useful nowadays, especially for a very, very, very tanky ship. Again, we are looking at something with a lot of shield resistances, and 82 to 89, with only one integrated rig for resistance. If you like tanky ships like I do, you will probably already have your eyes on this thing. So far I am, as I mentioned before, really satisfied with the overall hit points as well. 500,000 hit points with this build, with the current price tag on this build, which is actually not that expensive, is really solid.
Docking request accepted.
I don't remember if we have an nanocore that increases tank on this ship. I know the Hyperion bomber has one, obviously I use it, but for a Rattlesnake or for a Cobra, I'm not really sure if that exists. If it does exist, do tell me in the comments down below. Anyway, the one major drawback that the Rattlesnake as well as the Cobra has is the inability to use the smaller drones, because you obviously will lack the bonus for them. So when you're building these ships, you have to make sure that your drones are able to catch the smaller stuff. After all, back in the day, before implants and stuff like that, the Rattlesnake was one of my favorite targets with the Orators, because the drones on the Rattlesnake were unable to catch me Orators, and I was able to orbit at about 40 kilometers and slowly destroy the Rattlesnake. actually still do the same thing.
Autopilot engaged.
With the ships, they are still vulnerable with that.
Undocking.
However, implants and the
Destination
use of
reached.
some new modules that have been added has kind of helped with that. So if you're going to do some serious content in the game with these ships, I definitely recommend to use more of those utility modules that increase the speed and tracking of your drones, because when it
Warp
comes
drive
to
active.
being only limited to large drones, you have to compensate for the lack of speed, lack of tracking, because it is almost guaranteed that you will stumble upon and encounter a faster ship that is able to actually outmaneuver your drones. Now, of course, if you have those utility modules for the drones, you can click on those and the drones will receive a significant speed boost, tracking boost, and that definitely helps a lot against the smaller ships. I think my drones on the Rattlesnake, if I had a Rattlesnake, if I built it, I think they can reach around 10 kilometers per second. Large drones, which is very fast for large drones, so yeah, it's more than enough to catch most ships without a problem. And I definitely recommend that you use those utility modules as well as the damage modules. I mean, you have a lot of different ways to build the ships. The fact that you have a lot of default shield resistance means that you can definitely sacrifice some of the modules for extra utility or extra DPS, or depending on the situation, you can actually go full DPS or again full tank. All of the options are valid. My preferred build, since I usually do PvP with a Rattlesnake, I would have two builds, or with the Cobra I would have two builds. I would have a tanky one with integrated rigs, as I usually do, because that's just best when it comes to tanking, and I will have one specific for DPS. Now the DPS Cobra or Rattlesnake is actually very interesting because you do have some serious tank even if you fit one or two harness in a damage control. So when it comes to the flexibility of the build, yeah, it's pretty high. But those two types of builds would be my primary. Since this is a battleship, if I were to be in nullsec, I would be focusing on tank. If I were to be hunting in lowsec, I would be focusing on DPS. You can also go with tank, it's also a good idea. But in lowsec, because we all know what kind of builds we encounter usually, you don't really need a lot of tank. It's very rare that you will encounter a very tanked ship running a storyline or running an encounter. Most of the PvE ships that you will encounter, or even most of the PvP ships that you will encounter, are going to be focused primarily and purely on DPS with very minimal tank. At most you will see the PvP DPS ships at most will have maybe one extender, maybe a damage control, and maybe even one adaptive. That's usually what you would encounter in lowsec. For PvE ships, you will mostly encounter ships with full DPS modules and maybe one repair, basically zero tank. So those ships are usually going to be very quick, well, targets, I guess, very quick wrecks. They will be sent to Vita on the Express, on the Pod Express very quickly. Of course, doesn't mean that there is no properly built ships for PvE. You will have a very small number of ships. They are out there. I mean, I encountered a bunch of them, so I know they're out there with proper tanks, and those properly built ships will be able to easily counter a full glass DPS build. It's always been like that, and it will always be like that. I know that from my personal experience. I've encountered many tanky ships that I wasn't able to break because, again, they used a properly built tank, and against those ships that use a properly built tanky build for PvE and PvP, you need to bring a properly tanked ship to counter that. And that's how the food chain kind of works nowadays. Can this ship be properly tanked? Oh yes, it can, obviously, and it will be much easier when it gets that extra 4th medium slot, which will be very helpful and beneficial for this ship. Actually, I'm very happy that this thing did get a 4th medium slot, because it always felt like the Rattlesnake did lack a medium slot. Always felt that way, and I'm very glad that the ship did get a version of it that's going to have a 4th medium slot. Now, we are all aware of the push for some low slot modules becoming medium slot modules, and I can definitely tell you some medium slot modules will slowly migrate towards the high slot module slots, and that would be the introduction of the utility high slot module slots that actually was in the game back in alpha, back in the closed beta, but was later removed. And as I mentioned before, a lot of things in the game went full circle. I, for example, was drone pilot on the start, skilled out the drones, went through every single weapon system just to return to drones now, which again, I went full circle. And I can tell you right away, usually that's just how things happen in games like this. So now we will probably see, and I would actually say very soon, probably I would make a guess, maybe by the end of the year we will see the introduction of utility high slot modules. And honestly, I'm all in for that, because it would make the builds very similar to the EVE Online builds, and it has the chance to completely change how stuff works in the game. It has a chance to properly balance out that DPS issue that we all have right now. And when I say DPS issue, too much DPS, so there's a good chance that it's one of the solutions to it. And maybe, just maybe, a lot of builds will be changed for the, I would say for the better, because a lot of builds that are in use now are kind of old, and if you have been using a DPS build back in the day, like 4 years ago, you can still use the same build now and it's going to work just fine. I think players want to experience something new, and when I say something new, I mean a different build, different tactics as well, make the whole game a bit more interesting. And utility high slots have the chance to actually do that, so I have no complaints about the utility high slots. I think very few would actually, I think very few are against that, but I could be wrong, I don't know. I'm just saying, looks interesting, and I think we all want some new experiences, I guess. And I also want to build new ships, obviously. I really wanna experiment with the builds that I actually used to do a lot back in the day, but I've done every single build imaginable now, so I knew a rework of how the fitting works, I guess, would definitely introduce a lot of new builds. And it would be interesting to see how the new ships would actually perform. After all, a lot of these new ships have received some special modules. No, not all the special modules have been, that good, and that's why they have been buffed. The repair module on the Annihilator has been buffed, which is amazing actually. I said that needs to be buffed, and the developers actually did do that, because honestly it was required. So utility high slot modules, I'm calling that right now. I would be fine. It would be so. If they do that, I'll be so happy. I think a lot of players would be happy as well, because it will be a new opportunity for new builds to pop out and new tactics to be delivered in the game. Now, this little boat, I actually love this little boat. It's interesting to say the least. I love the fact that it just works, and of course I have good skills for drone boats. I think I should actually have everything on a level 5. I don't know, I have to double check that, but it is going to be a solid upgrade over the Rattlesnake. And now the main question, well, if you have the Rattlesnake, is it worth to go skill into the Cobra? Now, if you have expert skills for this ship, it's a no-brainer. Yes, it's going to work really well, and you will experience a significant boost in overall survivability. I would say the survivability is definitely the main trait of these ships. It's a big difference when it comes to tank between the older faction ships and the new ones. So tank-wise, yes, absolutely, when you jump in these ships you will feel a difference. DPS-wise, well, the DPS is going to be improved on this ship, and it has some utility to it with the bomb launcher. However, if you don't have every single expert skill on level 5, I think you'll have more DPS on the Rattlesnake than on the Cobra if you lack the expert skills. So if you have everything maxed out for this ship, yes, I would recommend the Cobra. If you don't have everything on level 5 for this ship, I would recommend to wait and skill to take full advantage of the ship's potential. And this is kind of a thing that is applicable to every single ship in the game. It's not really just bound to the new ships. Obviously it's applicable to every single ship, since you don't want to fly a ship that you have no skills for. So pretty much the same thing I will say for the new ships. Are they solid? Yes. Are they good? Yes. Will they be much better tomorrow after the update? Yes, that's true as well. So in my eyes, I'm giving a huge thumbs up for the Cobra ship here, for this little battleship. I also gave a big thumbs up to the previous 2 or 3 of the faction battleships that I take a look at, and so far the fact that I actually enjoy these ships means that you will probably enjoy them as well, since I've had the chance to fly every single ship in the game, and now I can pretty much compare them quite easily now. Back in the day it used to be different. Back in the day I actually had to test all of them out. Now after testing every single ship out, yeah, I can give a very accurate description of these ships, and I like these ships. I love them. They are, I would say, a great addition to the game, and honestly I'm glad that Titans are not added yet, although it's inevitable. You know, like Thanos said, I'm inevitable, so the Titans are saying the same thing. They are inevitable. At one point they will be added. By the end of the year, my expectation, what you guys also told me, by the end of the year Titans will make an appearance, and actually it makes sense. It is the realistic thing to say. They have been scheduled for the last year actually, but they haven't been released. Last year they haven't been released for this anniversary.
Warp drive active.
And I'll take these ships, the battleships, the destroyers, over Titans any day, because everyone can fly these ships. Titans are going to be reserved for the very rich, or for dedicated Titan pilots for big corporations, alliances, coalitions. But that will be it for the Cobra, a lovely little boat. It's a very nice little ship, and I'm pretty happy with it. So again, a big thumbs up for this boat. It has DPS, it has tank, it has utility, and most important thing, it has a unique trait that makes it different from the other battleships. It also has a trait that makes it a little bit different from the Rattlesnake as well. And so far, it's been a trend with the new ships, and honestly, I am pretty happy with the direction that we are seeing so far. But with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, as always. I'll see you next time.